The sky over Chicago was dark and heavy with clouds. Cold wind brushed through the streets, and rain poured down like endless needles of water. Cars rushed past, their tires splashing puddles onto the sidewalks. People walked fast, umbrellas held tightly, coats wrapped around their bodies. Everyone wanted to get home warm, safe, and dry. But one boy walked alone, his shoes soaked, his hair dripping with rain. His name was Ethan Parker, a 17-year-old high school student. Ethan worked part-time at a small grocery store after school. His clothes were simple, his shoes were old, but his heart was kind. It had been a long day. He was tired, his back ached, and his stomach rumbled with hunger. He dreamed of getting home, heating a bowl of soup, and resting before finishing his homework. As he crossed the street, lightning flashed across the sky, followed by the deep sound of thunder. Ethan pulled his thin jacket tighter and walked faster. Then out of the corner of his eye he saw something that made him stop. Under a broken bus shelter sat an old man. His gray beard was wet, his clothes were dirty, and his hands trembled as cold rain dripped through the shelter's roof. He had no umbrella, no warm coat, not even shoes that fit properly. He looked lost, invisible to the world. People passed by him one after another. Some glanced, some ignored, some even stepped away like he was a problem they didn't want to see. But Ethan couldn't move. He just stood there, staring. Something inside him felt heavy, like a voice whispering in his heart, "Don't just walk away." He hesitated. He didn't have much money, only a few dollars left from his shift. It was all he had until payday. Still, he looked at the old man again. The man was shivering, holding an old, torn bag close to his chest, as if it was all he owned in the world. Ethan looked around. There was a small cafe nearby, lights glowing warmly through the rain. Without thinking twice, Ethan ran inside, his shoes squeaking on the wet floor. He ordered a hot coffee and a sandwich, using almost all the money he had left. As the server handed him the paper bag, Ethan smiled politely and said, "Thank you." Back outside, the rain hit his face again. He hurried to the shelter, holding the bag close so it wouldn't get wet. When the old man saw him approaching, his eyes widened in surprise, almost in disbelief. Ethan knelt beside him and said softly, "Hey, sir, you look cold. You should eat something warm." He handed him the sandwich and the coffee cup. For a moment, the man just stared, not moving, not speaking. Then his hand slowly reached out. His fingers were shaking, but he took the food gently, as if it were made of glass. His lips trembled. Why would you do that for me?" he asked, his voice rough and tired. Ethan smiled, a little shy. "Because it's raining, and you look like you need a little help. That's all." The man blinked, his eyes filling with tears. No one had looked at him kindly for a long time. He whispered, "You'll be blessed for this, son." Ethan laughed softly. "It's okay, sir. Please eat before it gets cold." He stood up and turned to leave, but then stopped. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight? Maybe I can help you find a shelter." The man looked down, shaking his head. "No. I'll be fine. Go home, son. You've done enough." Ethan hesitated but nodded. He smiled once more, then started walking away. The sound of the rain grew louder, mixing with the faint noise of traffic. But something strange happened. After just a few steps, Ethan turned around, maybe to say goodbye again, maybe to offer his umbrella, but the man was gone. The bench under the shelter was empty. The coffee cup and sandwich were still there untouched. Only the man's torn brown bag remained, lying on the wet concrete. Ethan frowned, looking around. The street was almost empty. The rain was still falling hard, and there was no sign of the old man anywhere. He picked up the bag carefully, thinking maybe the man went to find shelter. The bag felt light, almost empty. Inside, there was an old photograph, faded and damp from the rain. It showed a man, a woman, and a little girl smiling together, a family once happy, once whole. Ethan looked closer. The man in the photo looked a lot like the one he'd just helped. There was also a small folded paper in the bag. He opened it. The paper had only one line written on it, in shaky handwriting. "Don't lose hope. Everything you give comes back one day." Ethan stood still, staring at the words. He didn't understand what they meant, but somehow, they felt powerful. The rain kept falling. The city lights blurred in the puddles. Ethan held the photo and the note close to his chest, feeling something he couldn't describe: sadness, maybe, but also warmth. As he walked home that night, one thought stayed in his mind. Who was that man? And why did he disappear so suddenly? Ethan didn't know that this small act of kindness, giving a sandwich and a cup of coffee, would one day change his life in a way he could never imagine. The rain slowed down as he turned the corner toward home. But deep inside, something new had begun, a quiet story of hope, waiting for its time to return. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The memory of that rainy night slowly began to fade, but not completely. Ethan Parker still thought about the old man sometimes, especially when it rained. Every time the clouds turned gray and the first drops hit the window, Ethan would remember that broken bus shelter, the torn brown bag, and the strange note that said, "Don't lose hope. Everything you give comes back one day." The photo of the man, woman, and little girl stayed safely inside a small box under Ethan's bed. He didn't know why he kept it. Maybe it was because the man had disappeared so mysteriously. Maybe it was because those sad, thankful eyes had left a mark on his heart. Ethan had tried to look for him again. For several days after that night, he passed by the same bus stop on his way home. But the old man was never there. One evening, Ethan asked the cafe owner nearby, "Sir, do you remember an old homeless man who used to sit near the bus stop last week?" The owner shook his head. "There are many homeless folks around here, son. They come and go. Can't remember faces anymore." Ethan sighed. Maybe the man had found shelter, maybe not. He would never know. Time moved fast. Ethan finished high school and got a small scholarship to study auto mechanics. He couldn't afford college, but he loved fixing cars. He spent his days learning about engines, wires, and tools. His nights were often quiet, just him, his mother, and the small apartment they lived in. His mother, Karen Parker, worked 2 jobs to pay bills. Life wasn't easy, but they managed somehow. Ethan often thought about the people who had less, the ones sleeping on the streets, hungry, hopeless. He never forgot the way people ignored that homeless man in the rain. It had changed something inside him. 3 years later. Ethan was now 20 years old. He had started working as a mechanic in a small garage on the edge of the city. His hands were always dirty with oil and grease, but his smile never faded. He liked helping others, especially those who didn't have much. Sometimes, when customers couldn't pay in full, he'd quietly cover the rest himself. His boss, Mr. Turner, used to say, "Ethan, you've got a good heart, but good hearts don't pay bills." Ethan would just smile. "I know, sir. But it feels right." One rainy evening just like that night years ago, Ethan stayed late at the workshop. The rain hit the roof loudly, and thunder rolled across the sky. He leaned against the door, looking outside. Water ran down the street, forming shiny rivers under the streetlights. For a second, he felt that same feeling again, like someone was out there in the cold, needing help. He walked to the small locker in the corner, opened it, and took out the old box. Inside was the photo and the note. The edges were a little more worn now, the ink fading. He looked at the picture carefully. The man's smile in the photo seemed kind, full of warmth. The little girl looked maybe 5 or 6 years old, holding her father's hand. "Who are you?" Ethan whispered softly, tracing the man's face with his finger. The mystery still bothered him. Why had the man vanished like that? Where did he go? And what did that note truly mean? He remembered the words again. "Everything you give comes back one day." At that time, those words had sounded like a nice saying. But now, standing there alone, Ethan wondered if they meant something real like destiny, or fate. That night, when Ethan got home, his mother was already asleep. He quietly placed the photo on his study desk. For a long moment, he stared at it, lost in thought. He made a silent promise to himself. "One day, if I ever get the chance, I'll help someone the same way again." He didn't know it yet, but that promise would lead him into a future far beyond anything he could imagine. Over the next few years, life went on. Ethan worked hard and saved every dollar he could. He dreamed of one day opening his own repair shop, not just to earn money, but to help others like him who were struggling to build a life. Sometimes, he volunteered at local shelters, helping repair old vans and community buses for free. The staff there liked him for his kind nature and simple manners. One afternoon, while fixing an old van near a homeless center, a man sitting nearby asked, "Why do you do this for free, kid?" Ethan smiled and said, "Because someone once helped me see what hope looks like." The man didn't understand, but Ethan didn't need to explain. He knew the truth in his heart. Years continued to pass quietly. Ethan was now 25. Life wasn't perfect, but he was doing okay. He had a small apartment, a steady job, and respect from his co-workers. But that memory from when he was 17, that rainy night, the old man, the torn bag, never left him completely. Sometimes, he'd look at the photo again and wonder if the little girl in it had grown up. Was she okay? Did her father ever find her? The mystery stayed alive, deep in his mind, like a candle that never burned out. And then, one ordinary morning, something extraordinary happened. A black car, shiny and expensive, stopped outside the garage. Ethan wiped his hands and walked out, thinking it was a new customer. But as the car door opened, a tall man in a suit stepped out, gray hair, kind eyes, and a familiar smile. He looked directly at Ethan and said, "You probably don't remember me, but I remember you." Ethan froze. His heart skipped a beat. Because in that one moment, he realized it was him. The same man from the rain. The black luxury car gleamed under the morning sun, parked quietly in front of Ethan's small garage. The raindrops from last night still clung to the pavement, sparkling like tiny diamonds. Ethan Parker wiped his hands on his rag and stepped out, curious. He thought it might be a customer with a broken car, or maybe someone dropping off parts. Then, a man in his 50s stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a crisp gray suit, polished shoes reflecting the sunlight. His hair was slightly gray, and his face carried lines of experience, not harshness, but wisdom. Ethan's heart skipped a beat the moment the man spoke. "Are you Ethan Parker?" Ethan blinked, surprised. "Yes. I am. Can I help you, sir?" The man smiled, a strange mix of warmth and seriousness. "You probably don't remember me, but I remember you." Ethan's brow furrowed. He tried to recognize the face. It looked familiar, but from where? His mind raced. "Do I know you?" he asked cautiously. The man's eyes softened. "It was raining, years ago. You gave me food when no one else cared." Ethan froze. His heart raced. The words echoed in his mind, pulling him back to that cold, rainy night when he had handed a sandwich and hot coffee to a homeless man. Could it really be? Could this well-dressed stranger be the same man he had helped all those years ago? The man extended his hand. "I'm Daniel Cross. You might remember me as, just a man in the rain." Ethan felt his legs go weak. He took a step back, studying Daniel carefully. The eyes, deep, kind, and full of gratitude, were unmistakable. The same eyes that had looked at him with quiet hope in the pouring rain. "Daniel," Ethan whispered, almost in disbelief. "It's you." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, it's me. I wanted to see you again, to say thank you." Ethan's mind swirled with questions. He wanted to ask everything at once. Where had he gone? How had he survived? What had happened in those years? But Daniel smiled and held up his hands. "One thing at a time. Let me start from the beginning." They stepped inside the garage. Ethan gestured toward a small corner, cluttered with tools and car parts. Daniel looked around, nodding appreciatively. "I remember that night," Daniel began, his voice calm but strong. "I had lost everything. My home, my savings, my family, everything that mattered was gone. I had been living on the streets for months, thinking there was no way out. And then, you showed up. You didn't ask questions. You didn't judge me. You just offered food." Ethan's chest tightened. I I didn't think it would matter much. It was just a sandwich and some coffee." Daniel shook his head. "It mattered more than you know. That small act of kindness reminded me that someone still cared, that there was still hope in this world. I promised myself that one day, I would repay that kindness, in a way that could change a life." Ethan stared at him, speechless. He could feel the weight of the moment, a strange mixture of disbelief and warmth. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a large envelope, handing it to Ethan. His hands were steady, confident. "This is for you," Daniel said softly. Ethan took the envelope, feeling its weight. Inside, he found legal documents, papers with official stamps, and signatures. His eyes widened as he read the first lines. "Ethan Parker is hereby the sole owner of Parker's Auto Garage." He froze. His mind raced. "Wait, what? How, why?" Daniel smiled gently. "That small gift you gave me years ago, it reminded me of what kindness can do. I turned my life around after that night. I built a business, a life, and now I want to give you the chance to build yours. This garage, fully paid for, belongs to you. Everything you worked for, everything you dreamt of, can start today." Ethan's hands shook. His eyes filled with tears. I I don't know what to say. This is unbelievable." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You don't need to say anything. Just promise me you'll use it not just for yourself, but to help others just like you helped me." Ethan swallowed hard, his voice catching in his throat. I I promise. I won't forget this. I'll make it count." Daniel smiled. "I know you will. Kindness always comes back, Ethan. Always." For the next few hours, Daniel and Ethan talked. Daniel told Ethan about his years of struggle, how he had found work slowly, built a business from nothing, and never forgotten the boy who had given him hope on a rainy night. Ethan listened, amazed. He had never imagined that one small act, a sandwich and a coffee, could lead to something so incredible. By the end of the day, Ethan understood something important. Life has a strange way of returning kindness in ways we could never imagine. He looked around his small garage, now officially his, and felt a mix of gratitude, excitement, and responsibility. This was more than just a gift, it was a chance to make a difference, just like he had made for Daniel years ago. As Daniel drove away in his sleek black car, Ethan stood at the door, watching. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the wet street. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like anything was possible. He whispered softly to himself. Everything really does come back, one day. Ethan could hardly believe what had just happened. He sat in his small garage, staring at the envelope that Daniel Cross had handed him just hours ago. His hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from shock and disbelief. All his life, he had worked hard, dreaming of having something of his own. But now, everything had changed in an instant. The garage he had been fixing cars in as a mechanic was now his. Fully owned. Paid for. Ready for him to build his dream. He opened the envelope again, slowly, carefully. The legal documents, official stamps, and signatures were real, heavier than just paper. It was real. His name was on it. Ethan Parker, owner of the auto shop. For a moment, he felt frozen. He had never imagined that a single act of kindness could lead to this. The memory of that rainy night came rushing back: the old man, the torn bag, the coffee, the sandwich, and the note that had said, "Everything you give comes back one day." Now, he understood. A few days later, Daniel returned. He wasn't just visiting to hand over the documents, he had come to guide Ethan, to explain how he could use this gift to not only change his life but the lives of others. "Ethan," Daniel said, looking around the garage, "I built my life from nothing after that night. And it was because someone cared about me when I had nothing. Now, it's your turn to make a difference." Ethan nodded, overwhelmed. I want to, Daniel. I want to help people the way you helped me. I just don't know where to start." Daniel smiled. "Start small. Hire people who need a chance. Help those who are struggling. Remember the boy who gave me a sandwich in the rain? That boy was you. Now, you can be that person for someone else." Ethan's heart filled with determination. He thought about the homeless people he had seen over the years, the kids at the shelter, the ones who had no one to guide them. He wanted to give them hope, just like Daniel had given him hope years ago. Ethan worked day and night to prepare the garage. He cleaned, painted, and fixed every corner until it shone like a new shop. Daniel helped him set up the business side: accounts, clients, insurance, and plans for expansion. But the real gift, Daniel said, was the chance to make a difference. When the garage officially opened, it wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of kindness, hope, and the power of giving without expecting anything in return. The small sign above the door read, "Hope Garage, kindness always returns." Ethan hired 2 young men from the neighborhood who had dropped out of school and were struggling to find work. He also offered free car repairs to families in need and small discounts for anyone who could barely afford basic service. Word spread quickly. The community loved the garage, not just because of the quality of service, but because of the heart behind it. Customers came, not only to fix their cars, but to support a place that believed in helping others. One evening, while Ethan was closing the shop, he noticed a man walking down the street, sitting on the curb, shivering from the cold. A small bag was clutched tightly to his chest. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The scene was familiar, just like that rainy night years ago. Without hesitation, he grabbed a warm blanket from the shop and a cup of coffee. He ran to the man. "Hey," Ethan said softly, handing him the coffee. "You look like you could use this." The man looked up, surprised. "Thank you," he whispered. Ethan smiled, kneeling beside him. He knew exactly what it felt like to be in that position, to have someone notice, to have someone care. As the man sipped the coffee and accepted the blanket, Ethan felt something he had never felt before, the full circle of life's kindness. The act that had changed his life was now ready to touch another's. That night, as Ethan closed the garage and walked home, he thought about Daniel. He realized that the stranger who had returned years later wasn't just a gift. He was proof of something bigger, that every small act of kindness, a sandwich, a cup of coffee, a moment of care, could ripple through the world in ways unimaginable. Ethan smiled, remembering the note Daniel had once given him. "Everything you give comes back one day." Now, Ethan knew it wasn't just a saying. It was the truth. He looked at the sky, the stars beginning to appear after the rain, and whispered softly, "Thank you." For the first time in his life, he felt truly blessed, not because of the garage, the money, or success, but because he understood the real power of kindness. And he knew that one day, the ripple he had started would reach someone else, in ways he couldn't even imagine. Months had passed since Ethan Parker officially became the owner of Hope Garage. Life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. Cars came and went, but the garage had become more than just a place for repairs. It had become a place for hope. Ethan had hired young people from the neighborhood who were struggling to find work. Teens who had dropped out of school, young adults who were lost or homeless. He gave them a chance. He taught them not only how to fix cars but also the importance of kindness, hard work, and believing in themselves. Customers noticed. They loved the service, but they also admired the heart behind it. People often said, "This garage isn't just about cars, it's about hope." One rainy evening, a night much like the one years ago, Ethan was closing the shop. The streets were slick with rain, and the neon lights of the city reflected in the puddles. Ethan pulled on his jacket and stepped outside. Something caught his eye across the street. A young man, probably no older than 16 or 17, was sitting on the curb. His clothes were wet, his shoes thin, and he clutched a small bag to his chest. Ethan froze. His heart raced. It was like looking into a mirror of himself at that age. Without hesitation, he ran inside the garage and grabbed a hot cup of coffee and a wrapped sandwich. He ran back through the rain and knelt beside the young man. "Hey," Ethan said softly, handing him the food. "You look like you could use this." The boy looked up, startled. His eyes widened, filled with the same mix of surprise, gratitude, and disbelief that Ethan had once seen in Daniel Cross. Thank you," the boy whispered. Ethan smiled warmly. "It's okay. Here, this will help you get through tonight. You're not alone." As the boy ate, Ethan noticed the small hope growing in his eyes, the same hope that had once saved Daniel Cross. Ethan knew, in that moment, that he was giving more than a meal or a blanket. He was giving hope. Back inside the garage, Ethan hung up his wet jacket and leaned against the counter. He thought about Daniel and the night when a simple act of kindness had changed everything. He remembered the note Daniel had given him years ago. "Everything you give comes back one day." Ethan realized now that life worked in circles. The help he gave, the care he showed, it had come back to him in ways he could never have imagined. And now, it was his turn to continue the cycle. He made a silent promise: he would keep helping, keep giving, and keep spreading hope. Not because he expected anything in return, but because he understood the power of a simple act of kindness. The next day, the garage opened as usual. But there was something different about it now. Ethan wasn't just a mechanic or a business owner, he was a mentor, a guide, and a beacon for anyone in need. Customers arrived, not only for car repairs, but because they had heard of Ethan's heart. People brought in donations for local shelters, volunteers asked how they could help, and even some of the teens Ethan had hired were now mentoring younger kids in the neighborhood. It was a ripple effect. One small act of kindness, years ago, had created a wave of hope that reached far beyond Ethan, far beyond the city streets. That evening, Ethan closed the garage and looked up at the sky. Rain clouds had returned, and a soft drizzle began. He smiled to himself, thinking about the journey from that cold, rainy night when he was 17, to now. He thought about Daniel Cross, the man who had returned to repay a kindness he had once received. He thought about the lives he had already touched, and the ones he would touch in the future. And then, from across the street, he saw another homeless man shivering in the rain. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a warm blanket and a cup of coffee, walking toward him with a smile. It felt familiar, comforting even. The rain fell on his jacket, but Ethan didn't mind. He knew this was what life was about: giving, caring, and creating hope for others. As Ethan handed the man the coffee and blanket, he whispered softly, "Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and sometimes, it comes back in ways you could never imagine." The man looked at him, eyes filled with gratitude, and nodded. Ethan smiled, feeling the full circle of life. He had been a boy who gave a sandwich in the rain, a man who received a life-changing gift, and now a person who could pass hope forward again. And in that moment, Ethan knew one simple truth: kindness always comes back. Always. The camera would slowly pull back, showing Ethan standing in the rain, warm light glowing from the garage behind him, as life continued outside. The soft sound of rainfall, the hum of the city, and the promise of hope filled the scene. The story ends with a quiet message for the viewers. One small act of kindness may not seem like much, but it could change someone's life forever. And with that, the screen fades to black.